Nice work.
So a couple lessons about this coffee experiment. One, have a menu ready. Two, have, I don't know, there's no real two, just like maybe a little bit more time. But here's the thing. So I had I was going to have coffee ordered, be sent here, and then I was going to deliver it. And 10 minutes in, they canceled the order. So then I was like, oh, now I have to go to Coffee Bean. So yeah, so that was a kind of a bummer. So, but sorry hopefully the first 10 minutes were great. And I'm glad to be on this call, and thank you to all of you for getting on. I guess, how I would love to start is for everybody to introduce themselves. And
we did that. Sorry.
Oh, you did? Oh, cool. You did that before okay, great. Well, awkward. Cool. All right. So I want to obviously get to know everyone, but I think then how I'll kick it off is just talk for a couple minutes about this campaign and what we are and what we stand for. And then I'd love to just ask, get to know you again. So you may have to repeat a little bit of what you've already shared because Liz isn't the candidate. So, Liz is West Covina. So getting to know you is probably a good requisite for my job. If I want to be elected in November. So an exciting time and an awkward and weird time as well. Running for office in 2020 is much different than running for office in 2018. For some of you who don't know, I was a candidate in 2018, obviously pre-COVID, and it was a whole different type of campaign running that time because it was a lot about ideas and generating ideas. And I think this time, it is about ideas, but it's also, you have so many compounding effects that are influencing all of our lives. And, just to start with COVID and then the national movement, Black Lives Matter, and then evaluating police and how we're going to approach that, and security. People losing their jobs, people having to turn their living rooms into daycares. I mean, the list can go on and on. So each individual has their share of stuff that they're balancing. It's pretty impressive. You talk to folks of how much they're balancing and the different ways they go about it. So this run for me is more emotionally rewarding and more difficult, because the last time I ran, it was like, oh, who's smart, who's got really cool ideas. And this time around, it's like, yeah, let's generate like really good ideas. And we just released our platform, comprehensive platform, policy platform a couple of days ago. But this time it's like balancing that with like, oh, you're talking to folks who are dealing with really heavy stuff and being there empathetic and supportive of them. And for me, my story goes back to West Covina. I heard someone, you guys were talking about West Covina, hearing about West Covina a lot today, actually. But that was my childhood. I was raised there. That's where I met Liz. We were kids when we met over at Edgewood. I was raised by a single parent who was challenged with mental health, had bipolar disorder. I became a ward of the state on 4 different occasions because my mom was too ill to take care of me. But I was surrounded by a neighborhood and a community of people who really supported me and loved me. If it was in the group homes that I was in, to the friends that I met at high school. And when I was going through those challenges, I never seemed to be left alone or, by myself, and, got into political politics, regardless of the partisan tilt that anybody has on here. If you have your calling to be a civic engager, and I really felt that, in 2007, and around the same time, my mom, unexpectedly got diagnosed with cancer, which really impacted me because life is short. She was 63 years old. They didn't think that she was going to be taken from me that soon. And I said, you go off and you do the thing you need to do. And I've always really desired to be part of communities and organizing and being involved in something. And when I moved here in 2011 to go to Pitzer College, I was a new resource student. For those of you who don't know, a new resource program is they really encourage applicants at Pitzer College, individuals who are over, the traditional age for college students to apply, because they wanted, the idea is essentially to diversify and have different lived experiences on campus. So if you're a student, you get to talk to someone who's a little bit older, and they can share those experiences, and they'll treat you differently than, say, maybe a professor. And so it was a pretty great time to be here. I moved here and I just fell in love with Claremont. I mean, I grew up coming to Claremont and really praising it from afar, taking the Foothill Transit when I was a kid to the Rhino Records and walking the institutions, Pitzer and Pomona, and I'm being like, I can't get into these schools. And then I got into the schools, and then I became part of the community and got to meet Sam Perdoza and Joe Lyons and organize citywide events on homelessness and technology, and became a volunteer at Uncommon Good. And it was like the first time I was like, wow, I'm doing all these things, these community things, where I'm getting involved and speaking out about local issues. And in 2018, I decided to run. I got to meet some of the current council folks who are amazing. Jennifer Stark and Jed are two people I got to know really well, and also Ed. And it was a really good loaded field of candidates. And I think it really tested me to be better and elevated me and made me fall in love with Claremont some more. And then this last year, I was a writer for the Claremont Courier. And I got to tell you, I wasn't expecting to run for office again. If you ask Liz, June 29th, when we're working on our community groundwork, which is a nonprofit her and I founded last year, but essentially rolling out this year, of serving young people from community colleges to get into government work and political work, which is been a passion idea of mine. If you would have asked her June 25th, 29th, is Mike running for office? Like, he's never even talked about it. Like, it wasn't a conversation we were having. And but then finally, just the stories. I think I wrote my last COVID story about Riojas, which is a local business in the village, and how they struggled and how they persevered and how they figured out how to diversify. And someone called me and said, "Hey, are you thinking about running again?" I was like, "No." But then we had a long conversation, and I said, "It doesn't feel wrong this time. It feels pretty right to be a public servant and try to support folks and where they're at and how they're seeing things." And I think that's the big thing. It's like all the wonky ideas and ideas and policies that we roll out and the steps that we roll out, any elected official that you pick, if it's me or someone else, like, all I ask is that you think about whether or not that person can see you and your shared experiences. Because I think during COVID, that's going to be, during COVID and post-pandemic, it's really, we need our elected officials just to, in some ways, be very supportive and be emotionally available, which I know is a huge ask to make, but I think that's an important ask to make. Because they're going to be making big decisions with structural deficits. They're going to be making big decisions about the Village South and policing, and they're going to have to balance that with the challenges that our folks are feeling, like we've talked about, or I've talked about early on. So that's a little bit about me, and why I'm here and why I'm still sweating and trying to catch my breath because I was moving really fast. But yeah, I guess if we can go around real quick and if folks can introduce themselves and a thing that they love about Claremont, I would just really love to start there, and then we'll get into a Q&A and start talking about policy platform and go back and forth and just free flow it. If that's okay with everyone. And for the folks who have coffee, I expect lots of questions from you. So who wants to kick it off?
I'm down to kick it off. I kicked it off last time, so that's cool. And I have coffee, and I'm very appreciative for you running around in the hot weather. I am Ellie Ashbelay. This is my wife, Missy Ashbelay. We've lived here in this spot for 6-7 years. Before that, we lived on campus. I worked as a dean on call, so we lived at Pomona College. So lived in Claremont now for like 10 years. I went to Claremont McKenna College for my undergrad. And I've lived in Upland and Pomona kind of since then. So for the last 20 years, I've kind of been right in this area. I'll let you speak for why you love Claremont, but I love the small community vibe, and yet we're right close to LA, so we can get into town for Dodger games or the theater or other things, but it still feels like a small community out here. Which is awesome. And I love the village and all the cool little restaurants. And as queer folks, we feel really comfortable here. We feel safe here, which is a really big deal to us as well. So those are some of the things I love about Claremont.
I'm Missy Ashbelay. I'm a teacher actually at Etowanda High School in Rancho Cucamonga. I have been here about 10-ish years, and I actually grew up in the Midwest. And one of the things that I loved about Claremont, literally the moment I drove into the city, was how it reminded me of home with the trees and which was atypical because I've been out here in California since 99, a long time, 95. And I hadn't lived anywhere that had trees that felt like the Midwest. And then to find that the community as well is equally as eclectic, diverse. There's so many things that are happening in such a small space, and I mean that in the best way possible. And fell in love with Claremont as well. So we love being a part of this community, and it's important to us. So there you go.
And I love you guys. All right, who else? Don't be shy, coffee drinkers. I don't know if you saw the contract, but you took coffee. You have to speak it.
Well, and Tanya, you're not shy, so I don't know what you're waiting for, girl.
Tanya's got something to say. She's always got something to say.
Well, when I moved here, it was to be close to my mother, who I had to put into a care facility. And since this was vacant and free rent, of course, why not? And I had been, my last job was for almost 15 years as a homeowner association manager. And so consequently, after a few months, we had an election and I became the president of the board and served for over 18 years. And I also served on the Safe and Fair Housing Committee, if any of you are familiar with it. It's important. And I did that for 2 years for Jim and Sue Keith. And we worked with the police department here in Claremont. And I love our police department. I've been extremely happy here. Thought I wouldn't like it because of the smog. And I don't know why I never noticed the smog after I moved here. But really, truly, I love Claremont. And I really like West Arms a lot.
I love West Arms too. I canvassed the whole West Arms today.
Yes.
Pardon?
I clocked a lot of steps today.
Walked around, yeah.
Oh, West Arms today, yeah.
Well, and
Tanya, introduce us to your friend again.
Carolyn.
Hi.
Hi. How
I
are
know
you?
Stephanie, I know Missy and Ellie. I moved here in 94 when I married my husband. He owned a unit here. And I've been on the board of directors. I've managed the landscape committee. I worked downtown at Visiting Nurse Association. And I've just always liked Claremont for the community that it is. I think we've got the best police department around. And I feel safe here.
All right. There's 4 left, and Matt and Liz. But
I can go, but there will be toddler talking in the background.
you're welcome.
If nobody cares, we're playing.
All good.
We're gonna register them.
So I'm Heather. Can I go? Am
Yeah.
I? Okay.
Yes.
Am I on? I'm Heather. So we've been here for about 2.5 years, like I said, and we actually we picked Claremont. We were moving from Washington State, and we had heard about Claremont specifically as a town that was walkable and that was connected to LA by transit, and that had lots of trees and that had a real like walkable core. And so that was why we picked Claremont, and I would say that's still why we love Claremont. We love just, I mean, in normal times, We love all the festivals and everything that's going on that we can do with our kids that's free and that brings the community together. So yeah, so I guess for us, like the most important things are to continue that that transit oriented, walking oriented, biking oriented development, and also affordable housing, especially in the core areas. That's all. Did I need to have a question? I don't know if I can form that in the form of a question, but
Mike, you're muted. How about Stephanie?
I get volunteered to go. Okay. I'm Stephanie. I'm also a product of San Gabriel Valley. So when I was growing up, Claremont was like, oh my gosh, they have hiking trails and colleges and everything. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Like when I moved out here, my family was like, what? You're going to live in Claremont? I know. But that's what I really like is the outdoors, and there are always people outside walking. You know, that's how I recognize some of you from our dog walks outside. And I just like that safe community feel. I still commute out to Baldwin Park when I get to go to work. And you know, this still feels like home. It's not too drastic, but there's a lot of that outdoor walking around living. And I appreciate that. And that's why my main concern is safety and, you know, I guess shelter for people, because that seems to be a big issue in this part of Claremont.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. It's nice to see you again. We met while I was sweaty.
Right.
Sorry about that. It was really hot. So, all right. So we got a couple more. We have a 414 number. We have Eric.
Oh, that's Sue. Yeah.
I'll go ahead. I'm the 414, which is Midwestern. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But I live here in Claremont now. I've been here for 3 years. My name is Sue McCarthy.
Hi, Sue.
My husband and my just started college son, Max, live here. And let's see. I feel like I echo many of the same things that folks said about why they really love Claremont. And, you know, the sense of a smaller community, but still having access to the amenities of a city are really nice to me. I really like that. I too feel safe here. I like the walkability. Something that I wish were different about Claremont was I wish that there were more Black people who live here. My family is interracial, and I miss that about home. And what else? Oh, I equally am concerned about affordable housing. I think it's a huge issue.
Yeah. All right. I think it's Eric.
Okay, I'll bounce off the Midwestern theme because I'm from Chicago originally.
Southside.
And, you know, South Side. And
okay.
as Mitzi said, yeah, I feel like because of all the trees, I feel like I'm in Wilmette or somewhere, you know, or Evanston. I mean, it really has that feel to it. So yeah, I was living in LA for, oh God, probably over 20 years. And when I started a PhD at CGU in 2012, and I'm still working on it now. And about 5 years ago, I moved out here, and the place I'm in, 665C, was the only thing available in my price range to buy. So I was really happy to see it, and it was cute, and I wanted a house. So it's as close as I could get when I moved in. And like I said, I'm doing a lot of work on it. But my activism takes me from what I'm studying, which is women's issues and gender issues, you know, obviously racism, sexism, all of that. And, so everything that's going on right now is just so like in the air, and, we have to deal with it, and, I'm busy writing my dissertation and talking about, when I was 7, I knew racism was a learned quantity, and it's something that is hard to talk about, but we are able to talk about it more easily now, I think, with everything that's happened, which has been unfortunate in so many ways. But it's burst a bubble that I think has needed in white communities in a huge sense. So that's kind of where my activism is. And, I've always hung out with artists. My brother has a partner. I mean, I've been around the marginalized people in my life, I think probably because I was, not wanting to admit I was a white privileged, middle-class woman. And so it just really resonates with me now because of, I think I've tried to hide my identity, which is obvious for so many people. So yeah, and the policing. And Mike, I identify with you so much because my mother was schizophrenic. I was never homeless because my father was always around, but it's a very difficult thing to deal with. And, it's that in itself has formed me in so many ways. So I sympathize with you a lot in that situation, and yours was 10 times worse than mine.
Appreciate that. I had therapy today, and just to say, I have therapy once a week because I do a lot and work a lot, and I think it's good for self-care. And I think it's important that elected officials and people who run for office and people who are public figures own it. I mean, I think you saw with Kevin Love, there was that hoopla, when he came out about his anxiety, like he was accused of leaving the bench because he wasn't getting playing time, but in reality, he left the bench because he had an anxiety attack, and I think it's just better to be even if you lose votes or people are uncomfortable with it. I mean, someone has to do it, where people until someone gets comfortable. So I appreciate the shout out, but I think, everybody's got something. I think we all have shared experiences that have defined us, good and bad. So obviously, all right, Eric.
No, faith and psychology and psychiatry are so good when they're wedded together, because I think it helps us heal from a lot of the wounds. At least it helped me tremendously. So thank you.
Last, but certainly not least.
Yeah, so I wanted to go last. Just wanted to hear everybody. So I'm originally from LA. I'm obviously with my last name, from Mexican descent. Didn't really know much about Claremont until I started working in Pomona, and I was working as physical therapy in aquatic therapy here at Ability First, and which is what I started kind of passing by Claremont every day, basically, and never really thought about being here. I was once I left LA, I went to Rialto, then Rancho, and then Upland, and then Montclair. I was just trying to get closer to work for me, so I don't have to drive as far. And so anyways, so I've been, like I said, I had said earlier, I've been here for about a good 7 years. My son's 7, so we got here right like a week or two before he was born. And I've loved Claremont because it's not where I grew up. It was horrible. I would not want to have my son grow up where I grew up. So for me, it's very quiet, which you will appreciate if you come from an area that's not as quiet and you have to watch your back and all that stuff. And I don't have to do that here, and I don't want my son to do that here. A couple months ago now, Mike called. I was actually taking a nap, and
when I like to call him.
So I usually don't answer numbers that I don't have the name to, but I just answered it, and he started talking to me, and it was something that was kind of I think was meant to be. Right after the George Floyd incident, it really hit me harder this time, I think, than other times that you've seen it. And growing up in the city that I had grown up, there was police officers that had killed people, from my community and stuff. And I think it was just it's kind of one thing after another, the pandemic and seeing people die, and then seeing him die the way he died. I think that really triggered me into getting back into politics, and it's something I talked to Mike about a little bit, wanting to get back into politics, not, running or anything, but getting a little bit more involved or becoming more of an activist and stuff. And, when you have a politician, you want to kind of see how genuine he is, or she. And I, kind of let him know what, where I kind of stood, and I wanted to kind of see, where he stood. And working in a hospital, you can kind of smell the BS from a mile away. And I didn't smell that with Mike. And that really put me in a situation where I wanted to help Mike in any way I could to support his cause. So, I throw everything on Facebook that he posts up and everything, so that people in the community is aware. I try to, do Twitter. I think it's Twitter, right?
Yeah, you're figuring it out. You're doing good. Twitter's a hard one, man.
Yeah, it's tough.
You want to think about these things on Twitter. You're not talking about Trump or Biden or something. But you're making it work. You're gonna break that noise. You're gonna get 1,000 likes at some point. It's gonna happen.
So I mean, I think it was one of the things where I guess the three major things was obviously the pandemic, kind of what his thoughts of policing was, and I think the other one was it. I forgot the other one. I don't want to kind of keep this flow going, but I really like what I heard from Mike, and I think I've been on all of your Zoom meetings so far, and it's really interesting because when you have somebody that lets himself be vulnerable to people, I think that kind of tells you a lot about the person and stuff. And, you don't see that a lot, especially in politicians, and something that, I think really needs to change. And I really hope that in November, Mike does get selected, because I think we need real people, not, business people that are just like, oh, business, this, that, and it sounds great. But the human aspect of it, I think, has been lost in politics. And, for so long, a lot of times, now, and I, told Mike this, I didn't think about it as much because I had my life, I had my work, I had my school, I had, my kid and my wife, and I just kind of put it in the back burner. And now I'm trying to get it back into where it's obviously not the first thing in my life, because it's my family's first, but that it's up there in the top 3 and stuff, because it's something that I feel, even though we live in a really good place, and even though, like I've told Mike, I've never had any issues here with police. I've called them twice, never had a problem and everything. But just the amount of money that is pumped in is something that really concerns me, because even though we have a really good school district and we have really good stuff, it's, that extra money that can go to other things in our community to help the community a little bit better, that I feel needs to be changed a little bit. And I know there was a little pushback from what I read from the police department when that was kind of pushed and stuff. And I think it's just one of those things where, in a city that's as safe as this, it's not a huge city. I think that the money should be directed into different things, and the things that Mike is kind of fighting for is, I think, things that really will help the city make it better. So, I wanted to be at the end because I knew it was going to take a little longer, but I think that's one of the biggest reasons why, I fully support Mike in his run. And I hope, like I said, that he wins, and hopefully we're a part of that.
What I think is, thank you, Eric, and thank you, for doing everything that you do. I mean, and then balancing and then making time for this campaign. And I'm grateful to it. And you're getting pithier. You're getting what they like in organizing. You're getting your personal story down, and it's getting shorter. So get on about 15 more, so we never have 0 people on a call, and we'll keep rolling through it. I think it'll be great. But I do heart you. I appreciate you, and I'm glad that I made a friend in you, because I think it's a nice way to sort of look at you and say the things that you're dealing with at Pomona Hospital, and the challenges and some of the things that we've talked about the stories that you've seen, and even some of the scares, man. Like, yeah, you know, the COVID scares, where those are just real for folks, especially in the front lines, where they don't know if, you know, that's the day that they're going to contract it and that's the day they're going to bring it back home. And that's just a real anxiety. And everybody has that. I would imagine frontliners at a different level, but like across the board, even like myself, if I go into a store. And so I think it's just being really empathetic, and being easy on yourself as well, you know, and being kind. I'm just going to do about 3-4 minutes of my policy, and then I'm going to open it up, and then you guys are going to all throw a lot of really great questions at me and really challenge me and find all my contradictions. But I do think what I like about this call is that there is varying degrees of what people believe in. It's not, I don't see everybody being on the same page. You know, there are folks on this call who are, you know, very adamant that they like their police, right? That's a big important part, that they like their security, you know, and people for affordable housing, you know, and you know, and trying to balance all of this stuff, even if I don't completely 100% agree, because like I'm human, is a job of a council person to never dismiss an individual who believes something differently than you do. I believe that this police station, compared to many other police stations, is very kind. It's not like, that's not what I'm going out and saying the people behind the badge are terrible human beings. It's not about the 103 workers and whether or not I think they don't go into their work each and every day thinking and feeling that they're providing a civic service to their city that they work in. But reimagining community safety is a real big part, a central part of our platform, because I still think there are a lot of challenges, a lot of things that we need to surface and to address. I think implicit bias is involved in everybody's life. It's a key component, and I think that impacts how a police officer does their job. So if they see someone who's a person of color, you know, and then they say, oh, that person looks suspicious, even though they're not doing anything. To me, that's implicit bias. The same way that if someone in my neighborhood picks up the telephone and says ding-a-ling-a-ling to the police station and says, oh, I see a person of color walking down the street. Police, 911 dispatcher says, are they doing anything? No, it's just making me uncomfortable. And then the police have to show up. That puts an unfair burden on individuals who live in our community. And I think there are ways to address that and identify the root to those issues on both ends. Having an elected official that says, hey, I'm not going to accept that, you know, implicit bias from myself, from my community, and then the institutions that reflect the community is fair game. I think it's also fair game to say that I want to downsize the police so they're not the first responders to mental health, substance abuse, homelessness. That's not their job, period. And I think if we have crisis calls where if you call 911 and you have a dispatch and they know that it's a homeless call, or if they know it's someone struggling with mental health or substance abuse, that they'll get someone out there who's an expert in that field to diffuse the situation and then find the continuum of care that person needs, versus a police officer. And I speak this from personal experience, but like when I was a foster, when my times that I would be taken out of my home, my mom, when she wasn't well, she would say, oh, well, he's the one acting up. And police officers weren't very nice to me. They were really aggressive to me. Because they felt like I was endangering my mother, because they didn't understand that my mother was struggling mental health, and they didn't understand that I was in a situation that was pretty terrifying. So they're not trained. So like for me, it's important that we create a parallel system that is our first responders, to build that infrastructure, and then potentially downsize, not potentially, but to downsize our police and reroute that money into mental health services, substance abuse services, homeless services. 9%, you know, it's a fair argument to say that human services, which is, you know, oversees a lot of what we do with homeless and works to partner up with all the different institutions that help provide those services, they get 9% of the budget. It's that kind of thinking that we can toy with, and I think Claremont is the type of community where we can lead the way regionally and say, we're going to put these items in place, because we do not want to make a person of color feel like they don't belong, that when they walk outside, they are going to be looked at differently than someone who looks like me. And I think there's other ways to address the policing as well. We're looking at the police commission, giving them more teeth, more citizen oversight, unmasking stop data so we can see if police officers are participating in implicit bias, so we can analyze that information. So individuals from across every spectrum of how they see the police can see the whole totality of the information and then work together. Because I know at the end of the day, if you're pro-police, you're also pro-neighbor. And so if your neighbor is saying, well, I don't feel like I'm comfortable, because when I walk outside or someone calls the police on me, you're going to listen to them, and you're going to balance that with your pro-police mentality. And we're going to have to work together to figure out making sure that that person feels comfortable, and then making sure that we have a safe and secure community. And I am a firm believer that if our first responders are substance abuse and mental health, we're going to decrease our crime at our borders. The 10 freeway and over nearby the 210 freeway, where Jed Leano's district is at. And we're going to do it in a way that's healthy and loving. And we're going to have to be patient with that. With that said, the second part is affordable. Oh, do you want me to finish, or you want to ask now? You can go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking that's kind of the defunding of police, to put that money into the people that you're talking about that are better suited to approach these particular circumstances.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying defunding the police. To me, if you just cut 10, 15, 20% of the police, for example, you would get about $2.5 million from that. And for me, that $2.5 million, some folks might argue, well, let's put that into human services. Here's the problem. If you decided to put that money into human services, you'd cut 20% of the services that the police do, which they do fill those roles that I described. Even if we agree or disagree, they do. And then say you want to put it into human services, well, guess what? You still have a $3 million structural deficit. And then you still have a looming debt. So then you say, well, maybe instead of we cut the police, we'll put it towards our structural deficit. Okay, great. But now you have a quarter to a fifth of your workforce that was helping you protect your community no longer there. Go ahead.
You lost me on that, because I thought Claremont was looking at a $2 million deficit.
No, it's going to be between either 2 or 3, because COVID, it's hard to project. A lot of folks that I've talked to have said 2.8. So that's the number that we have put on, I think, in our policy. But it can go, and it could be lower than that. And it could also be a lot higher than that. And we'll get into that in the structural budget in a second. But even if it's 2 million, just to fit into your point, if you put it into the human services, what will happen is that you still then will see a ballooning deficit. What I'm arguing for is that we downsize intelligently and put some of the psychiatric services in programs like Tri-City to be privately and public funded through grants, etc. So we don't just completely pull the plug on the services that we currently have. Because if we do that, then what's going to happen is we'll have a community backlash. And maybe it's unpopular, and maybe I lose a few votes because I say that. But to me, it's hugely important that people understand that you can't just downsize the police without implementing a parallel system that can replace some of the functions that I disagree with. I don't think that the police should be the first responders for mental health or homelessness or substance abuse. And there's been a lot of stories that have come out on the commissions about why that's highly problematic. But we have to create something, a parallel infrastructure to do that. And it's going to be a challenge. Good.
Are you for getting rid of our police department, getting the sheriffs in here?
No, sheriffs would be worse.
Yeah, I agree.
And we actually spoke to a sheriff who lives in this community who just moved here from Glendale. I talked to him a week ago, and he's actually very much for what I just described to you, because he said he's a sheriff, and he was like one of the nicest humans ever. He's like, he works out of like the sheriff near Glendale, and I can't remember which department. And he said 10 out of my 50 guys that I oversee don't have mental health and substance abuse training. We don't do that. So like, I like that that's advocating for it. And I kind of threw me back because I'm like, a sheriff, police officer, you know, and he's like, no, like you're not saying anything that we don't agree with. So to answer your question, no, I would not want to acquiesce to the sheriff, especially if you do some Google searches on the LA County Sheriff right now. They're dealing with their own. So reimagining community safety is one. Affordable housing is the second. And 100% for the. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, still on the police matter, and you know, maybe I'm being very naive because I don't know, you know, government organization, but the police already have an infrastructure that's very strong, that is there. So why wouldn't you want to create a division or a department or a wing within the umbrella, under the umbrella of the police department for these human services, so that if someone gets, you know, someone gets fired or somebody retires, then you maybe funnel that money into those human services. You know, obviously you would look for grants that would fund those services, you know, in the beginning, but then if they're folded in, then you've got the response. You know, I would think that would be much more, you know, would be much more efficient in that respect, rather than farming it out to, you know, private organizations, but because you still have the need for these and the oversight.
No, that's a great question. I have an answer for that. And I think that the police would have to give up for it to ideally work, which I don't necessarily agree that it could, but the police would have to give up a lot of their state and federal state protections that they have. They would have to give up a lot of transparency. The big challenge with the police is that there's a lot of secrecy around what they do. And even though Claremont does a better job comparable to other police stations, they hold on and withhold a lot of information. Two is that who would oversee that? The second thing is, who would oversee that in the police? Would it be the chief? Well, again, the chief isn't an expert. So that's why we're arguing she's not a mental health expert. She's not a substance abuse expert. She may have some advanced trainings than maybe some of the individuals that she manages, but then she's managing those individuals who would have to commingle. What I'm arguing with with our policy is that putting mental health experts in Tri-City, for example, putting substance abuse in Tri-City, these are experts that literally are trained, go through years and years of schooling, and have been on the front lines to do it. Doesn't mean that they can't have a partnership with the police. And we put this in our policy program called the Cahoot. It's a program in Eugene, Oregon called the Cahoots program. And what they do is they have the 911 dispatcher. If you call and you see someone who's is being challenged with mental health, you call the police, and the dispatcher's like, that's not an issue for the police. They call a 24-hour roaming caravan to go to that site and then to address that issue. Sometimes, depending on what the call looks like, the police will be outside downstairs or away from the scene, but be there just in case the situation goes from it being, you know, something that's manageable to something that could escalate into violence. So that's what we have in our program to get to that point. And then when we get to that point as a community, we say, okay, what's next? And so that's where we're at in our policy. So it's a great question because it's not one I've actually been asked before, because you're basically arguing that, like, can you keep it at under 110? I don't agree with that, because I don't think the police should have management over mental health services. But you know, that is a discussion that's a great question. Like I'm like happy to be thinking through that. Sue.
But I would think if you did something like that, then you would hire, you know, the police chief or the person that oversaw that division with the expertise. So you wouldn't have that issue where, you know, with the police secrecy or the police issues, it would be a separate thing. So, I mean, that's all management and organization. So
so they would have to give up a lot of immunity. Two, going back to the budget, I don't want to get too in the weeds where it's snooze fest, everyone. It would be cheaper to give it to Tri-City than to pay for it through city services. Because Tri-City would be able, there's different grants and different programs that can fund it versus a city government. And also because of unions and how that works too, and bargaining, you may potentially give that bargaining power to the police, which then that's a whole different ballgame. So there's it's very complicated, and I don't want to go too beyond the weeds, but it's a good question, and you and I can talk offline more about it. Sue, but it's a really good question. So Sue, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to comment on the thread that's going on, and in respect to police response to mental health issues, sort of another angle on that. From my own personal experience, when we first moved here, my son suffered with depression just because of leaving home and family and things like that. And the school was concerned about him, and their first response was to contact the police. And as a young Black man, coming home to the police waiting for him freaked him out and freaked me out. And so, I feel like even with the, kindest, most humane local police department you could imagine, that fear is still there, and it feels very disproportionate to the issue at hand. And so, I do feel like having mental health experts and folks who aren't attached to law enforcement brings something different.
So I think that's a really good point, and thanks for teeing that up, because, we just had a school board meeting this past, I think last week, where students from all, backgrounds were saying how frustrated they were. High school students, middle school students who were frustrated because they're not seeing teachers in the classroom who look like them. Their, implicit bias where sometimes they felt they were getting looked at differently than their, white counterparts, where they would get pulled to the side and get their bags checked. Or where sometimes they would come and approach the police and feel like they were being treated differently for a complaint similar to someone else who was white, and then have that white person get a different response, a more proactive response. So 100%, we have one of our major supporters has a son who is autistic, 6'5". And when we talked she was one of the first people that I spoke with. She's like, she's had her son. There have been folks who called the police on her son because of how tall he is, and that is just not right, and so that is a training, and implicit bias training is also in our plan, not only for our police officers where folks can be trained, but actually city government officials and citizens who want to participate in it, to fund an implicit bias training, because we need to keep talking about it, because there are blind spots in all of our lives where we don't see when we are participating in that. And I also think that the police are like that too. I talked to a police officer a couple of days ago, and he was like the nicest human in the world. Great. He was super nice. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to dismiss the reactions of, countless folks, plus, the hundreds to almost 1,000, I think, folks that went to the streets at one point in this region and not allow that to be heard, and find a balancing act to make sure this community feels safe, but also at the same time, we eradicate implicit bias for good, which is a long-term goal. All right. I'm going to move to the second one, but we can always pivot back. If you guys want to stay on for a few more minutes, I would love, just because we're going to talk a couple more issues. Affordable housing is a big one. It was brought up by, I think, 2 individuals. Yeah, so I think 2 people brought that up, but affordable housing and community safety really go hand in hand in my mind. And again, our full policy is on the website. But affordable housing, 100% for the Village South, 100% for maximizing the number of affordable housing units we can build within reason. And when I say within reason, meaning not dismissing aesthetics, not dismissing with the Claremont way, not having it be a thorny, I don't know what the phrase is, but it like a thorn in my eye, it just completely is an aberration from the character of Claremont. I think that the Village South is an opportunity not only to bring mom and pop shops into the community, but I think Village South also brings in an opportunity to bring more entrepreneurs and young people to come live here. There is a Claremont Courier article that came out, I believe, today. Matt, I think, flagged it for me, but we've been talking about it for the last couple of weeks, that if we don't bring affordable housing units into our community, our schools are going to shrink. And school shrinking means that less teachers will want to come teach here, but obviously less because there's less jobs that are available, less funding for the schools, which means that it could interrupt some of the programs that we really enjoy and we really thrive on, et cetera. It's a domino effect. So we need working families to be moving in here. There is a stigma sometimes when people think of working families that I've heard where, you know, working families may change the community in a way that people don't feel is fit. Yeah, like I'm completely against that stigma. I think it's a terrible stigma to have, where you think that affordable housing is going to equate to a usurpation or an undermining of your community. The tax revenue that can come forward to help with the structural deficit, bringing more affordable housing units into the community through the Village South expansion and other programs will help us get out of a structural deficit. We talk about the Village South and affordable housing within the concept of a 15-minute city, where people can get all their non-work essentials within 15 minutes, which means an expansion of bike lanes, which means an expansion of public transportation, which means an expansion of dial ride services, which means an expansion of all these programs that can make it easy for you to go shopping. We put this in the plan as well. We imagine affordable marketplaces where you can get tomatoes and fruits, beyond just the farmer's market on Sundays. And so to me, the Village South can bring entrepreneurs and young people. It can bring working families, it can bring affordable housing units, and on top of and all that combined is revenue stream for our city that we're going to desperately need. And people need to start thinking about the post-pandemic right now. So affordable housing is a big part of the conversation. And I think community safety fits into that because we want everybody on this call and everybody who lives here, when they come live in this community, to feel safe and not feel the weight of their identity. We talk about this a little bit in the 15-minute plan is that, if we expand, like maybe have Spanish signs that are signs with Spanish on them so people don't feel the weight of their identity. They feel like they're separate. Find different ways to include people, these microaggressions that really impact people and compound them because they don't feel like they're part of the neighborhood. And at the same time, for folks who are feeling, about security, building out an infrastructure, a crisis response infrastructure, so that way we know that say, for example, the goal line is built and, it's going to inevitably bring commerce, but it's also going to bring homelessness. That instead of us getting frustrated and locking ourselves in and being fearful of it, that we have the infrastructure to support those individuals and place them in the right programs. And then any questions about affordable housing? I'm getting my vibe, so I think I should pause and then open it up. So that's finally after the first one. So.
Are you going to talk a little bit more specifically about homelessness, or, that's not exactly affordable housing, although I think they are kind of related. And also, I feel like the sun has set on your room and you look like you're in the dark.
Liz warned me of this. And I forgot to turn on my light.
So just, could you turn on the light? Because I can barely see your face.
There. Sorry. Is that better? Yeah, that's better.
That's a little better. Yeah.
Cool. It's a dark. We're gonna get us like a whole studio. Stephanie, I will address that within Stephanie's question as well.
It kind of piggybacks off of that. We have these hotels down here, and that's where a lot of trouble occurs. And I know when I go out for a walk, that's my big concern right there.
Yeah.
What can be done about that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Matt flagged this because he's like, hey, Mike, and we've done, and I was like laughing because I was running around getting coffee. He's like, this is going to be a question that more people are going to ask. What's the response? And I'm like, don't worry about it, Matt. I got a response for it. A couple of things. I don't know if that's what he did when I texted him that. First thing is that from what I know about the Hampton, and this is like a lot of it is hearsay and talking to city officials, is it's being pushed to be renovated, to actually upgrade it and have it to be more of a high-end hotel, which would then be the idea is that being more of a high-end hotel, they're not going to be taking, people who are staying at the current won't be giving cash, won't be using the current hotel system in a way that kind of allows folks to participate into some uncomfortable activities, as I like to call it. So I will be pushing for that. And we're going to actually be writing something towards that we're going to be pushing for that renovation and support. Go ahead.
Which hotel is that you're referring to?
Did I say which?
Because we have the Knights Inn that used to be the
Knights Inn.
Sorry. And then there's the Claremont Lodge and the Motel 6 on the other side of the freeway.
Didn't mean to say Hamptons. Sorry, I'm
Okay.
probably thinking of the Hamptons after sweating. No, Knights Inn is the one that that folks are looking at to renovate, and there's been proposals. I talked to Brad Johnson, who deals with urban development and all the development, and it just hasn't got off the ground yet for a variety of reasons. So go ahead.
I have a question. First of all, the man that owns the Knights Inn is a Claremont resident.
Right.
He did everything he was supposed to do. He lost $75,000 because our planning commission did not think that it was nice enough to have a Hampton in there. They wanted something that looked more spectacular next to the 10 freeway.
Right.
That could have brought in a lot of revenue for us, and we might not have a $2 million deficit or even larger. We had for that a city council that investigated the water system and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that, and it went nowhere, and they should have known in the beginning they were not equipped to even handle it. So I'm looking for somebody that's not going to let those kinds of expensive things be charged to the city. I want a city council that has.
Yeah, I agree. So the water. Okay, two things. One, democracy can sometimes be messy, especially when you have commissions and committees and you have people with different agendas. And I think it's fair to say that democracy doesn't always play out. People who have access and influence sometimes are able to push what they want. We know that there's always a certain cohort of individuals that participate in these activities. That's something that was put, into the commission meetings and city council meetings. One thing we talk about is that if I am lucky to be elected and if you afford me your vote, that I will not be a kind of city council person that is idle, making decisions based on just the individuals that show up to a city council meeting.
Okay,
Here.
well, this is what I'm looking for. I want a city councilman that'll put someone from our fifth district on the planning commission. We are not represented. Do you guys realize that? We have no representation whatsoever. So the people that all live above Foothill are making decisions on the buildings that are being built in the part of Claremont that we live in.
Yeah, and there's downsides to districts, and then there's upside. And the upside is that this election, you'll be able to pick someone that you feel reflects that. I ran in 2018, and if you go on the website, the Claremont Courier acknowledged that we were the only campaign in 18 that actually talked about south of the village. That's literally why I felt comfortable running this time around, because south of the village reflects a lot of who I am. It does not mean that we're not one city, though. And I have to be thinking, when I'm running for office for District 5, I expect to reflect District 5, but I also will be weighing that with the rest of the city. So I will be looking at up north and being like, are you guys doing affordable housing? Because we're taking care of it on our end. I'm going to be working with them. When I'm talking to Jed Liano and I'm like, I know you have issues with substance abuse and mental health in your district and on your lines. That's as much of a concern to me as what's happening on the 10 by the 10 freeway. Because we have to support each other. This is not us versus them. But I agree with you that we need to elect someone that reflects bringing people, or who prioritizes, putting people, getting people who are normally not involved. And I think that's why we did this apartment series, where it's like apartments and people who live in apartments are often overlooked because they just are. It's harder to organize in them. It's harder, just to get into those places. People sometimes write off apartment people as transient and not long-term residents. Well, some of you have been living here quite some time. And how many people have actually knocked on your door running for office? And so that's the thing we want to change, is that mindset. So whatever future candidate that runs after me, they're going to go, you know what, if I'm going to win election here, I'm going to need to work for it in the areas that are now more involved than weren't previous. to answer the mental health, but I'm going to tie that mental health and then safety on the border. Just in going back to the hotel, I definitely want to get rid of cash exchanges, the immediate future, where hotels can't just take cash because like that's highly problematic, right? The second thing is it goes back to our borders need to have, especially in the area that you spoke to, Steph, the crisis response about like getting folks off the street who are addicted to drugs, who are dealing with mental health. This is not a short-term solution. This is something we'll have to build out, and something that won't be built out from human services. It'll be built out from a third party like the Tri-City. Homelessness. So I don't want to oversell anything is what I'm trying to tell everyone. It's going to take work and involvement. No worries, Janice. I hope I will call you after. And then the homelessness, we are at 17 homeless. We saw that number decline. Daily Bulletin was like, oh, Claremont, is declaring that they're tackling homelessness. You talk to Ann Turner, she's not really happy with that because she'll tell you that homelessness is not just a city problem, it's a regional problem. And you're seeing a 5% increase in Pomona's homelessness when they already have hundreds of homeless folks. We're in this together. So we introduced basically with our homeless issues to create a regional partnership that's loosely formed right now and strengthen it so our neighbors feel supported by us and vice versa. And this goes back to building out mental health outreach programs that will get help not only our city, but also will be helping regional actors. Because like Tri-City actually performs functions not only for Claremont, but it actually performs functions for Pomona and Laverne. So thinking about our neighbors is not only a good thing just from like, like a humanitarian perspective that they're our neighbors, but also a good to help address all the different issues. We can't do this alone. And homelessness is one of those things that is, before COVID had hit, we saw a 40% increase in populations over the age of 70 in San Gabriel becoming homeless. Like our elders are becoming, like people are not seeing that. It's not something that's visible to them here in Claremont. And we need to make sure that they understand that like our moms and dads, our grandparents could be pushed out because they can't survive on fixed income because of soaring rent costs. And that can happen to folks my age who can't keep up with their bills. So we have to be thinking ahead. So let's try to answer all your guys' questions. Woo, this is a tough crowd. Matt, it's a tough one. All right, last one. But great questions. And I really feel good because it makes me think about everything. Last question is the economy. Is that, oh wait, hold on. I'm so sorry. About the water issue, I need to address this. The city council that looked over that water issue did not do due diligence to see that when you take water from one place and then you horizontally take it to another place, you can't legally do that. And so we pushed really hard to acquire our water rights without having an infrastructure in place. And then when they were able to acquire the water rights, or were told that, they were like, well, we don't have the infrastructure in place. So hundreds of thousands of dollars were wasted by consultants that I feel, and from what I've read, that were motivated by not getting the city water, but motivated by the contracts that they were awarded for pushing to get the city the water. So I agree with you. And that, excuse my French, but that crap ain't gonna happen with me. I have no motivations to try to waste $250,000 of the city on water. I understand water is going up. I think there's sustainable living, but we know there's sustainable living practices that we can continue to promote. It's something that's a sore spot for a lot of folks because they don't like the fact that their water is going up. But we'll continue to practice sustainability in this city and find ways to keep those costs as low as possible, which is a huge challenge. And no one should BS you on that. It's a hard one to address. Lastly, the economy. Structural deficit, between reframe it, between $2 and $3 million is the structural deficit. We've lost a lot of businesses. Lemley, we lost the Lemley before the pandemic. We're seeing that being converted, I think, into a coffee shop or like a kind of a coffee place. The Augies, we've seen the Claremont Club shut down. The next council person will need to think about bringing revenue into this community. We have several ideas about the structural deficit. One is about the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce can be a central part on elevating our local businesses if leveraged correctly. And it could also provide a service to low-income families who may need additional assistance. So we delivered an idea to use the Claremont gift cards that the Chamber distributes and actually fund that through private and public grants and private donations to actually give those gift cards to a handful of, depending on how much we obviously could raise, to individuals, low-income individual families and individuals who are having a hard time staying afloat. And then they'll use that gift card. They can only use that gift card into the city. So finding creative ways to chip away at the problem, because there's not going to be a one solution that says, all of a sudden, we're going to bring back all the shutter businesses on Foothill and in the village. The second thing is that the next council person needs to be regional, needs to be an ambassador, and use, organizations like the Chamber to help promote our city. So we have relationships with the Covina mayor and the El Monte mayor and the San Gabriel City Council. We have relationships with a lot of these different folks, and we want to work with them to help them in their needs to bring businesses and our needs to bring businesses. So it's a regional and it's a conjoint effort. And if I'm elected to office, I will be out on the front lines day in and day out, attending regional meetings. The San Gabriel, Valley of Councils or City, San Gabriel Valley of San Gabriel Valley of Councils, and different entities that have been established that you can plug into and find ways to recruit businesses to move in and back into this community. If anybody tells you that it's just going to be overnight, you need to balance a $2.8 million structural deficit or $2 million, just keep in mind, we've seen our colleges shut down. We need to make sure we have an economic plan with our colleges, not separate, but together, to make sure that we can get those 100,000 visitors that we've lost because of COVID back, to get the 20% transit-oriented tax, which the city gets from all those travelers staying at the Double Grove and all these different hotels, back, and to make sure students feel comfortable and this is a place that they want to enjoy, which means we need to elevate our businesses and attract them. So it's a lot of moving parts on top of how long will it take that COVID will allow us all to be back in the real world. So the next person needs to come in there and be balancing, trying to get us through today while thinking about 6 months to a year to 2 to 4 years from now. And those are the 3 policy platforms, the huge ones that we have. There's 10 pages worth of policy on our website that you can take a look at. And our website is pretty fleshed out now. We have our mental health forum that we did 10 days ago, where we talk about bringing a consortium in place so we can bring all these different groups together to have a conversation about moving, mental health programs around. Maybe the high schools need a certain mental health program that they just not been exposed to, best practices and such. And then we will continue to push out content, but it's pretty wide. It's pretty versed. So any questions about the economy?
So many questions about the economy. You can't leave it that, the economy.
Oh, but it's like the one. It's like it's the one.
Really briefly, I wonder if
I feel like I can't get in trouble with the economy.
No, if you can fix the economy, go. Yeah, you got my vote. But
I'm okay with getting in trouble because I want people to know where I stand. If they're going to vote for me, they'll be like, if I agree with you on 85% of things, but I know I have your ear on that 15. I know he's going to come over and have coffee with me, and I'm going to talk to him about it. And if I know he's that type of candidate, and I hope I can project that, because that's who I am.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts on what should become of the Claremont Club property?
Speaking of traps, thank you. As I just gave you a yard sign. No, Claremont Club's a tricky one.
You're welcome.
100% for it to be refinanced if the private funding can come. But if it can't, and the community decides that they need to go in a different direction, I'm open for ideas like a convention center, open for a convention community center, or open to something that will bring people together, generate revenue, and replicate some of the things that we like in the Claremont Club and keep it there. The Claremont Club didn't generate a lot of dollars for the city government, but it did generate a lot of dollars for the city businesses. I kind of like to see that we can maybe create something that can generate for both, on top of bringing people together, not only within the city, but outside of our city walls. so that way people come and use the convention center, something public. But I'm 100% in support of folks trying to keep it alive and bring it back if they can figure out a funding scheme for it. Yeah, I wouldn't push back on that is essentially what I'm saying. Eric?
So I had a question, and it's like just down the street from all of us, is that I know they opened up the Fitness 19 and obviously it's closed right now, but why is it so hard for anything to get started in those new buildings or the new little area that they built there? I think I've seen like, I don't know, like a kind of like a semi beauty salon in some of them, but I'm just trying to understand why it's so hard, because I feel like that's a pretty good area. You know, things to us, it's, I mean, if I can walk somewhere to go get something, I've had the Chinese food there, but you know, that's about it. And, you know, there's nothing else. I don't understand why that is so hard to get anything there. I don't know, but, you know, that's closer to us than the village, you know, obviously, because we're here, but, you know, I'm just trying to figure out why that's so hard to just get anything in there.
Yeah, so
There's no air.
for simple answer is that 1 out of 5 businesses shut down in their first year because they just don't make it, you know, and it's like tricky. And then I think it's like, I think the stat after that is, you know, after 3 years, about 40%, and then it goes up. And after 5 years, about 65, 70%. So it's, you know, it's being a small business owner, and you're talking to someone, just a little bit about my background is I have been both a failed business owner and a successful business owner. And failing sucks. It's hard. It puts a lot of weight on you. I don't want to see any businesses coming into this community and failing. And so if there's a business that we approve to come in here, I want to make sure that the council is invested as much as the chamber is invested, as much as anybody that can promote that business to be successful. With that said, that's, you know, some of these businesses that I've seen, I think Eric and you and I have talked about this in passing, sometimes they just don't resonate in a community. And I think on top of that, it's trial and error sometimes. But on top of that, with COVID and with the pandemic, you know, these are the things that you're going to be weighing. Like, what are people's now have sort of reconfigured themselves and said, okay, like I canceled my gym membership, man. I have a yoga mat, I have weights, and I have really great Spotify workout music. And maybe we will do a campaign video about that. No, I'm just kidding. But what I want is for folks to understand here in this call is that people are going to reconfigure what they think should be coming into the community. There is going to be a cohort of folks that are saying, well, Claremont is a very specific way, you know, and those individuals need to be listened to and be heard. But I would counter to say the more creative we can be to bring young people, families together, and our seniors and programs, you know, we talk about it in our platform about immersion art. Like, why not have like mazes and fun things that can be occupied in that empty space where you can have artistic things and watch old movies outside. And that really fits into our cultural heritage in this community about really generating thought and fun and excitement. And it doesn't always just have to be, you know, these restaurants or, you know, it could be activities. I think activities will get people because you go and you do something fun and you're hungry and you sit down and eat with people and you're like, oh, and then you kind of want to have a beer. So like thinking about that full village experience is something I hope our next council does a better job of. Cool, you're all voting for me? Great. Yay! Oh, wait, no, just kidding.
I'd like to say thank you to Ellie and Missy for hosting this.
Thank you for you're all, besides Steve, you're people I've never met before. I hope that I didn't disappoint, even if you end up not voting for me, which would hurt me, but you don't need to tell me. That we keep an open dialogue and always talk. If I'm ended up being elected, but you don't vote for me, just know that you will be able to call me and, you know, engage with me at any time. If I don't get elected, I'm going to look at this group and be like, it's all your fault. I'm just kidding. But no, but I'm
Guilt.
No
Guilt.
No.
no guilt. Guilt votes, right?
Yeah.
No, Tanya?
Michael, you got my vote. You're a real humanitarian, and that's #1 in my book.
I want to come hang out with you. Thank you. That's really nice.
You need to hang out with Tanya, Mike.
Missy says
Mike,
you have to hang
need
out with Tanya.
Tanya. She is awesome.
I want to go paint
You
birdhouses
opened
with
the
Tanya.
door. Huh?
I want to go paint birdhouses with Tanya.
Oh, B-Mike, come over. I got a great patio all set up with fans and everything in the
In
paint.
the morning, Mike, Tanya plays some of the most kick-ass rock and roll,
Sure she
like
would.
old effing school.
Anybody
It's
wants some
fantastic.
AC/DC, let me know.
That's right.
Tanya likes to rock out on her patio, and I love hearing the music when I'm walking the dogs and stuff.
Oh, thank
Like,
you.
So interesting. I didn't knock on doors where you all lived last time. I didn't. That was in an area. I did the San Jose.
maybe that's why you lost.
Well, I lost by like 3,000 votes. Let's. That's not your apartment complex fault. That is called no one knew who I was the first time around problem. But I really like this space. I think it's an interesting space, and it feels unique. It fits into the Claremont way, but it also feels unique and sort of like kind of not disconnected in a bad way, but it doesn't feel, I don't know, when I walk on it, it's like a whole different, it feels a different, like a little bit of a different world. All the characters too. There are characters, man. You guys live around some characters.
Yes.
You have all different age groups. I mean, I had some people being like super engaging and other people being like, I don't vote ever. And I'm like,
Right.
you have a voting record of voting in like 10 elections. Like, why you gotta lie to me? Like, I was like, please, you just don't want to talk to me. It's okay.
Yeah.
We love our little community.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have so many different types of employees, people doing different jobs, backgrounds, people who live from all over. Someone I think lives in the complex from Australia. There's someone, a lot of folks actually, 2 or 3 people I talked to lived in Glendale before living there, doing all kinds. One guy is like owns a cleaning supply store, and he's like, I'm just waiting in the week. So when all these retail stores open back up, they hire us first.
That's right. They're gonna need you. Yeah.
Like, this guy's killer. Like, I was like, he's got a plan. He's like, we're good, we're fine, we're getting by, but once these places open, we're gonna get.
Yep.
And I was like, but it was so focused and intent. I was like, all right.
Yep. We're a good community here, though.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for this. This was our first balloon, our trial balloon for our apartments. So hopefully we didn't disappoint. And
This was great.
coffee, we will figure out the coffee. We won't have the same mistakes with coffee.
Coffee was great. I still have half. It's good. It was really delicious.
Okay, don't drink the rest of that at 7:30.
No, now you need wine.
Yeah, we've drunk our coffee and have moved on to wine.
Good.
I never started with
Pay your
coffee.
electric bill.
Right?
I
gotta
think the
go
next time
swimming
it's got to
first.
be wine with the
Yes,
West
we know.
Arms.
Right?
That's right. Wine.
That's
at
right,
West
Eric.
Arms.
Wine at West Arms.
Yeah, we gotta get Mike like one of those like ring lights that go around your phone.
Oh,
Like lights up.
Set up.
We
Is this-
need to
Yeah,
get him one of those
lighting
things.
leaves something to be desired, Mike. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna.
I warned him.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, we can
You know, man, we just don't listen. It just
I know.
that's our thing.
Say it.
Okay. How about last thing I'll say? What would you rather me done today? Oh, it got quiet. Okay, cool.
think of
Would it
anything.
Choices. No,
rather be flyer for 2.5 hours talking to voters, or would you have rather me think about lighting in my place?
Okay, whatever.
But it needs to be solved because I got a lot of heat for the Facebook Live. The Facebook Live, like, I was rushing that day because, we all have jobs, right? Like, it's
Right.
like, so I'm like getting out of the job. I'm like, okay, cool, ready to go. And then I set it up and I'm like towering and I'm like looking down. It's like looking like I'm like this. And I'm like, this is really cool. This is really fun. And then everybody afterwards, I got like 6 text messages being like, man, your policy was really good, but like, your backdrop. I gotta fix your backdrop.
It was weird.
You
Yeah,
can't come over.
We got you. I'll send you some recommendations.
Thank you.
All
Ellie,
right.
Ellie's all over your lighting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone. And if you want yard signs or any of that fun stuff, I'll put in my phone number. You all have my phone number. Well, actually, you have the flyer that I handed all of you, but you can all text me you have questions or doubts, you're thinking about voting for me and you just want to have a further, longer conversation, or you see something in the policy you disagree with and you want to talk about it, like, that's what I signed up for. So
Thank you, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Have a
Thank
great
you for your
night.
time.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Nice
Thank you.
meeting you. Thank you,
Thank you for
everybody.
your time.
Heather,
Hey,
Jennifer,
everybody.
Good
all
Good
great.
night, everybody.
Peace,
Bye.
West
Good
Arm
luck.
peeps. Bye, Fred.
Night.
End the recording.
Night.
Ended.